Y'all know how to throw a party. Good morning. I'm Priscilla, Tennant, associate pastor here. My pronouns are she and her. I'm so glad to be with you this morning. And so appreciative for all the festivities that happened yesterday when I was ordained. Thank you to all of you who were here physically or in spirit. I felt your presence and your love, so thank you so much. For my first reading, I want to share, it's actually from the Black Lent Daily Devotional in March. I know we're past Lent, but I felt like it was still relevant. And it actually has a few components to it, but it's going to be worth it. So let's go through those. The first is a Bible passage that's probably familiar to many of us, even if we can't state exactly where to find it. I know that's how it is. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Verses 1 to 8. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. We did that yesterday. We got to do more of that. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, and a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. The second piece is the poem by Langston Hughes, Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? And then the final piece is a meditation that's titled A Time to Pause, and it's written by Reverend Dr. Tiffany Christian, who is the Creative Ministry and Outreach Coordinator for the Rock Church in Boone, North Carolina. COVID brought the world to a screeching halt in 2020, and at the same time, George Floyd's murder set it ablaze. Now, here we are, embers of hatred smoldering, smoky haze of reality in our faces, restlessly busy because we feel the drive to make change happen now. As the text explains, there is a time for all things, including a time to pause. Have we taken time to sit with our grief and anger? Have we taken time to unpack the discomfort of feeling our foreparents' fear? Have we sat and really analyzed the ugliness that our current political context has revealed in those we previously thought were decent people? Have we taken time to care for those closest to us? Have we triaged our lives and done what was needed to heal? These are questions that invite, perhaps demand, that we take a moment to pause. Change is inevitable. We are called to be its midwives, to usher it from ideal to reality. This work is about making the choice to rest, prepare, and gently guide the birth in accordance with sacred preparation and timing, wisely coercing and encouraging, judiciously intervening, but not destructively enforging our impatience. My teenage daughter and I were talking through this, and she created an image that we're going to share on the screen at this moment. We know that the change is coming. We know that it's beautiful. We know how to get to it. But if we don't take a moment to pause, reflect, prepare, and plan, then all the beauty gets destroyed in our haste. Thank you so much, Terry. I find it interesting that Langston Hughes never entertained the idea that a dream deferred could survive and prosper. He details the many options for death and destruction, but completely ignores the other options. Is that the space we're living in, the space where now, not now automatically implies not ever? No, we can't afford to live there. A dream deferred can be revitalized. grow, thrive, and give life anew. Deferred is not dead, just as pause is not quit. We are not bound to the rigidity of linear time. The tiniest acorn given time to sit and germinate becomes the mightiest oak. In these trying times, hold on to this. Perhaps you are not buried and justice is not buried. Instead, you and our greatest visions of change have simply been planted. And in the protection and sunshine of a community of like-minded world changers, it will bloom in the abundance of time. I feel like I could go home. That preached itself. My second reading, another biblical passage, is from Exodus chapter 18. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave, but select capable ones from all the people, those who fear God, trustworthy people who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and as God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied." Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable people from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided for themselves. And then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. I make the claim that the Spirit led me right to this Bible passage for today. But one could argue that it was just my own personal inclination, given the circumstances we find ourselves in as a community, facing so very many changes. Instead of selecting one of the assigned portions of the Bible outlined in today's lectionary, I hope you approve of my decision to use my freshly awarded pastoral authority to order from the secret menu. While one might debate that the Spirit itself led me to the text, it is undeniable that my spiritual director led me to it. For those unfamiliar with the process of spiritual direction, it is help given by one Christian to another, which enables that person to pay attention to God's personal communication to oneself, to respond to this personally communicating God, and to grow the intimacy in that relationship. The spiritual director does not direct in the sense of giving advice or solving problems. Rather, the director helps a person respond to God's invitation to a deeper relationship. I sought one out as soon as I realized that my ordination was coinciding with me taking on more responsibility at the church. I meet with her every 2 weeks, and it's been wonderful to bounce things off of someone who is as much of an expert as anyone can be about the mysterious practice of discernment. When we discussed my new role, she began talking about what is within and outside the scope of a pastor. And then she referred to this Bible story where Jethro job shadows his son-in-law Moses and says, "Hold up, something does not seem quite right here." After our session, I turned to my Bible to reacquaint myself with the story, and I felt led to use it as the basis for my first sermon post-ordination. There are 3 questions I want us to explore with this narrative. The first is, who in your life can say to you, what you are doing is not good? Now, before you start making a list of people, let me elaborate on what I do and don't mean by that question. I am not talking about people who pass judgment on you in a way that yields brutal honesty like a knife. What I mean is, who do you allow to get close enough to observe how you're doing things? Who can share what they notice and offer, if need be, some advice or tough questions, reminding you to take responsibility for your actions, especially when they negatively impact others? Who is allowed to second guess you? Let's call those people your loving accountability team. Think of those who play this role in your life, and if you're satisfied with them, great. If not, we have some work to do. A sure sign that your team needs attention is if you have not been called in about something recently. If you have not heard some version of what you are doing might not be good, it's time to bring your team in for a huddle. They need a pep talk, a re-inviting, if you will, so that they know that you value their input and need it for your growth, and most of all, that you can handle it without ejecting them from your life. On the other hand, some people should be cut from the team, or at least temporarily benched. Everyone should not be allowed an up-close opportunity to take stock of how you do things for all sorts of reasons. You may need to gently reassign people to a different team in your life and practice some limit setting. Or be on the lookout for the new people to join your team. You may need to work on yourself to be ready to handle hearing some of the hard truths that your loved ones have to share. The second question that the story challenges us with is, are you wearing yourself out? The answer might be yes if you felt that the ancient words from the text, this work is too heavy for you, were speaking directly to you instead of to Moses. What are you doing right now that is too heavy? Can you put something down? Can you add more people to your side of the tug-of-war rope to help pull the weight? What this passage is reminding us of is that collectively, we are called to be a wholeness network, not individual healers. Nurturing and healing comes from many sources, and as a community, we should draw on our collective strength and web of resources. And when something is outside of our scope, we should make referrals outside of the community. But first, we have to stop pretending that we can carry the burden on our own. We have to admit to our weakness, the thing that the systems we've been conditioned in tell us never to do, lest you not get the job, the promotion, the admiration of parents, peers, or partners. We're conditioned to don our masks to hide our struggles. But you know who can help us with that? Our loving accountability teams, because they notice things. Here's an example of a recent loving check-in that I was the recipient of. Hey, in our recent group call, you didn't seem like your usual effervescent self. Is everything okay? I wanted to just focus on the effervescent part, but somebody I loved was picking up on something that I wasn't even conscious of until they brought it to my attention. With that simple statement, my friend was challenging me to let down my guard and tell the truth about whatever I was struggling with. I made a mental note that she ought to be captain of my team. As we forge into all kinds of new changes, there are so many opportunities to experiment with new approaches. As we celebrate the installation of an old friend as our senior pastor, how will we stay attuned to when things are too heavy for him? Because what I know for sure is that Kip is great at paying attention to what might be too heavy for the rest of us. And it's one of the many things I love about working with him. He's quick to offer to take something off my plate, adding it to his own. While this intention is steeped in empathy and compassion, it can easily result in overfunctioning, the dark side of our pastoral legacy. May we start to head in a new, more healthy direction. And you should all know that you are invited to be part of our loving accountability team. Kind of speaking for Kip now, sorry. I vowed to notice that what might be too heavy for you, and may we never have to pretend with each other that everything is all right if it is not. May we be reminded that we are a wholeness network, an entire community of people willing to play their part as we nurture each other, as we heal and struggle side by side. The final question that I would have us consider is, with this story, what is this story saying or failing to say about conflict? This question comes out of some scholarly research that I found on the text. The article is by somebody named Victor Baer, and it's titled Moses and Jethro, Harmony and Conflict in the Interpretation of Exodus 18. The author encourages us to be suspicious, stating that the happy ending in Exodus 18 appears more as a miracle than something that simply had to have taken place. In the end, Jethro's reforms finally take place, but it does not have an automatic or expected result. His advice is sound because its aims are one with God's plan for Israel. However, it could have been rejected because it undercut Moses' authority and potentially interfered with Moses' mediatory role between Israel and God. We should not allow the final harmony embedded in Exodus 18 to hide the tension. This chapter is really not an idyllic family scene, but rather an important and complicated attempt to work out a potential conflict in a peaceful manner. This chapter should be read as a human world application towards the principle of relationally conceived power. If God is willing to indulge and compromise for the benefit of Israel, then similar attitudes must exist in this chapter. Establishing harmony in relationships is a matter that is indeed difficult, even for God. Exodus 18 develops this theology on the level of interpersonal relationships. Peace does not come alone. Exodus 18 does not represent an ever-existing oasis of peace. Peace and harmony are reached through a willingness to retreat, to listen, and respond with understanding. In summary, first, who can you call in with love? And who can do the same for you? Turn your attention to recruiting your own personal loving accountability team. Second, what are you carrying that is too heavy? How can we as a community rely more on our wholeness network? And finally, how can we learn to do conflict well? This is the work we are called to do together. If you can hold on to the belief that our greatest visions have simply been planted, and in the protection and sunshine of a community of like-minded world changers, it will bloom in the abundance of time. With God on our side and a few Jethro types and Moses types and Kip types among us, I believe that we will be able to withstand the strain as we pay attention, encourage one another, and have the courage sometimes to speak up and sometimes the willingness to retreat, listen, and respond with understanding. Change is inevitable. We are called to be its midwives. This work is about making the choice to rest, prepare, and gently guide the birth in accordance with sacred preparation and timing. Think of the image we saw of the butterfly in its chrysalis. We know the butterfly is there. We know it's coming. We know it is beautiful. We know how to get to it. But if we don't take a moment to pause, reflect, prepare, and plan, then all the beauty gets destroyed in our haste. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable. Amen.